The Last of Us premiered this Sunday on HBO. We're here to cover what happened in the first episode right now on the Sundowners Club. Welcome, I'm your host, Sean. To my right, my co-host, Sterling. What's up, bud?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. So we've been waiting for The Last of Us to come out on HBO for a while, and just to let the audience know, based on our experience, before we cover what happened in the first episode and what we think about what we saw and where the show's going to go, I did not play the video game that the show The Last of Us is based on. You did play the games, both of them, part 1 and part 2. So we're going to come at this from a perspective of somebody who is going into watching the show not knowing what these characters looked like in the games, what the characters' personalities were. I'm going strictly off of what I saw on the show, the first episode, and my impressions of it. And then I want to get your feedback because you know the game. And so I think it's two different points of view based on experience of the games and how that impacted what you saw versus me. So I want to start off with that. You know, give me your summary of the first episode. I think they combined 2 episodes into one for this first episode. And when I saw the back end of the episode, kind of made sense why, because I think it would have been really disjointed if they would have cut it off, right around the time of being in the quarantine zone in Boston, or when they first get there, or after the events of what happened to Joel's daughter, Joel played by Pedro Pascal, his daughter Sarah. I think if that's where the first episode would have ended. I don't know that would have worked.
That's exactly how the games did it. You had that scene, and then it went right into the quarantine zone 20 years later. So I mean, that's.
So what was your thought of just overall the first episode as a game player of the game, watching this first episode, not knowing where they're going to go ultimately with the TV show, but what were your thoughts? Give us your summary of what you saw.
I didn't think it was as bad. I'm not as impressed as some of the other people seem to be. Other people are acting like it's the greatest thing that's ever existed, or the greatest game adaptation, which, I mean, maybe it is. That's not saying much, though. Game adaptations have always been pretty bad. For me, it's kind of like, the game came out back in 2013, and then they remastered it and re-released it. With that, though, you have an established view of kind of who the characters are and how they look, and the casting kind of throws me off. So it's
just in terms of how they look, or
how they look, and some of how they act. It's so I mean, for people who have never played the games like you, that's not going to be an issue at all.
Right.
And there'll be people that have played the games that don't care about that. They're like, hey, they're not real. It doesn't matter. But I mean, from my perspective, like, if I can give you an example, you're a huge Star Wars fan. Mm-hmm. I like Star Wars too. But imagine if they remade episodes 4, 5, and 6, the most iconic part of the trilogy, and then casted new actors to play everybody. And then those actors don't really look like the characters you remember. I don't know. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, it would have to be an amazing script. That would have to be a near perfect story, and even then, it would take me out. Well, the biggest thing is it would take me out of the movie, or the movies if I was watching it, because in my head I would think, not only is this not the actors that played the characters, but they don't even look like the characters. Right. So that would throw me off.
And that's kind of how I feel.
Okay.
But I mean, it's and they're not bad actors. Like no one did a bad job. It's just when you have that established view of how they look and who they are.
Yeah, you come into it with a bias in your brain because that's what you've seen.
Because I've known what these people look like for 10 years, and even though they're not real, I mean, the visuals have gotten to the point where they look like they could be real people. I mean, there's actors you could pick that look just like them. So
right.
But there's some other things they did a really good job on. I think the sets look great, like the quarantine zone, and there's a scene where they're at the very end when they're going out and you see the buildings leaning on each other.
Yeah,
that looked like it was pulled right out of the game. The music was great. I think if they don't have the same guy doing the music, I mean, I feel like
music was good.
I feel like they used the exact same intro music from the game, or really close to it. But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of potential. It just has. I've got that baggage of knowing these characters for 10 years that a lot of people won't have.
Yeah, I went into it, only thinking about prior zombie apocalyptic movies and series I've seen before, of course the comparisons to The Walking Dead are going to be made. What I like about this show is we started, and we're not going to cover every single scene breakdown like we do some other shows, but I'm going to talk about the main beats and get your feedback. And what I did like about this first episode is we start out with this 1968 talk show with two epidemiologists.
I like that.
And I thought that was super cool. The host, played by Josh Bernier, the guy who played Big Head in Silicon Valley. He was the host of the show. And then John Hannah, who people might know from the Mummy movies. I thought it was really cool how they discuss, potential pandemic scenarios. And one of the epidemiologists is confident that humans could overcome a pandemic. And then you see the character of the epidemiologist, played by John Hannah, who starts to talk about a spores fungus, that would basically it was like a virulent fungus parasite that would take hold, and as the climate would get warmer on Earth, and humans would become a host for this virus, this fungal virus, and that there's no cure for it. There's no way to get around it if it happens. And I thought that was a really cool lead-in. It reminded me of, there's been a few other things that we've seen. There was a scene in The Watchmen, I believe, where Dr. Manhattan was on the show. There's been a few other shows that it kind of reminded me of that, but I thought it was a really cool lead-in to, hey, this is not your normal zombie apocalypse type deal. And it started getting into the fungus parasite. And I think that I read that this was based on the Richard Attenborough Planet Earth. The maker of the game saw the fungus, the spores coming out of a live ant, and that's what inspired the idea for this apocalypse. So I thought that was really cool. And then we get into meeting Joel and his daughter Sarah, and Sarah is getting money from the drawer to get Joel's watch fixed for his birthday.
Yeah.
And so we meet Sarah, Joel's daughter. I thought the actress, played by Nico Parker, that was my favorite part of episode 1, by the way, was her portrayal of Sarah. Again, I don't know anything about the game, but the only gripe I have was that we see a little bit later when this is pre-social media, pre-Twitter and Facebook, to where the information didn't travel as fast. But we hear on the TV when they're making breakfast, when his Joel's brother Tommy shows up and they're going on a job site, you hear on the TV or something that there's been an outbreak, and you start to hear about it. And then when she goes into town to get the watch fixed, they throw her out of the store, and so you start to see things that would make you believe, hey, something's going on. And then she gets back to the neighbor's house where there's an older lady that's being watched, and there was a really cool shot of her in the background when you see Sarah, and then behind her the older lady has got her mouth wide open.
Yeah,
and
you're turning. Really
cool shots. Now they did make some choices as far as the camera angles for this show. Maybe trying to make it more like the game. I'm not really sure, but so there were a few camera angles that I thought were a little strange with the way they were filming it, but. From a cinematography standpoint. But I liked Sarah. My only thought was when the outbreak started to happen and chaos was ensuing and her father's not home yet, the dog is barking and she's starting to hear, okay, there's planes flying overhead. Something's really wrong. And she goes outside and you're like, the TV just told you to stay inside. And she's a smart girl. And of course, for the sake of the story, she walks outside and all chaos ensues, and Joel shows up with Tommy, and they said, we've got to get out of here. So I thought that the first 30 minutes of the episode where they created that sense of chaos, and the information is not traveling as fast as needed, but we're seeing the events happen around them, but they're not getting it on their phones, or they're just basically hearing it over TV, radio, and then what they see in front of them, which I think is kind of cool because we've all lived through that.
Well, it's interesting in the games, the apocalypse happens around 2013, and then when they fast forward 20 years later, it's 2033.
Okay, whereas this is 2003.
It's 2003, and then the apocalypse is.
Well, this reminded me of, I lived obviously through September 11th, and I know where I was and where I was working, and we didn't really have the speed of the internet. The internet was around, but not like obviously it is today.
Right.
And you got all your information from the TV. So when September 11th happened, for a lot of people that were around then and had cell phones, cell phone service went dead. I mean, you couldn't get a signal. They were overloaded. Planes were coming out of the sky, landing, so you couldn't hear anything, in the sky in terms of the normal flights that you would hear every day when you're out and about. So there was that sense of chaos, and we went home and you watched the TV. So that I think they handled that part really well with, okay, this is the only place we're getting information, and we don't know anything else. So Joel and Tommy and Sarah are trying to make it out of town. They're trying to get out of the chaos. And I thought it was really cool how they veer off and they're barely making it out. And then a soldier who we don't see their face is talking and says, "What?" and says, "I'm sorry." And you realize that he has to kill them. He has orders to kill them.
That scene is pretty much verbatim from the game.
So that was exactly like the game.
Pretty much exactly. The way the death scene, the way he reacts, everything. Almost shot for shot. Like I saw somebody do some side by side comparisons. And it's almost identical. And there was a lot of scenes they created, like when they go by and the barn's on fire. The scene with the plane, that's a little different, I think.
When it crashed behind them?
Yeah, in the game it was, I believe a car comes in and runs into a gas station first a car runs into them, and that's how they have to get out of the car.
Right.
And then
because in this they flipped, right?
Yeah. And then I think it was the plane debris that did it in this.
Yeah. The plane crashed, and then whatever the debris was.
So they fake you out in the show, making you think the car's gonna, but it didn't.
But they made it.
In the game, it was the car that caused them to flip over.
And Sarah's hurt, so he has to carry her. Yeah.
And he carries her in the game too. And then in the game, a car hits the gas station. There's this big explosion. And then in that they had the plane explosion. So there's minor differences there like that, which that doesn't bug me at all. But a lot of the scenes they created were verbatim. Even some of the dialogue was.
They
verbatim.
planted some seeds even before Sarah died about Tommy was concerned about, hey, we need to stop and help this family, or we need to do. And Joel's like, go.
Yeah, that was a line directly out of the game.
Yeah, Joel was not playing around. So he was thinking about one thing only was, we have to protect my daughter and get her out of here safely. So I thought all that, I was all in the first 30 minutes. I thought that was really well done. And then we cut to a scene of a little boy that is arriving on the outskirts of the Boston quarantine zone. It's 20 years later. So when Sarah dies in Joel's arms, it's a big scene, and then it flashes 20 years later, and now we have a child showing up in the Boston quarantine zone, and 20 years later we see the devastation of society. And man, that was a tough scene. The boy's not really speaking, but they bring him in and they're testing for the virus at this point, and she's trying to make the boy comfortable. The actress is trying to make the boy comfortable, and you're going to get
Is that a boy? I couldn't tell. I thought that was a little girl. I wasn't sure. Maybe.
Correct us if we're wrong. I thought it was a boy
I could remember.
whose hair had grown out.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Could be wrong, folks, but that's what I thought. But this child is sitting there, and the actress does a really great job of portraying, that they care, but this is what they have to do. So they're trying to make the child not know what's about to happen, and we know that they give the shot, and the child dies. And so then you see Joel, who is, another individual, doesn't want to take the body out and put it in the fire. And Joel just grabs the body of the child and tosses it. So you see this 20 years of hardened, probably a lot of anger, depression, cold, void in him, right? And then we meet Tess, played by Anna Torv. I really like Tess in this episode. Yeah. And Tess is talking to this guy, Robert, who's stolen or sold a battery to him, and they're trying to get a battery and cheated her. But Robert is clearly terrified of, which you find out is Joel. Yeah. And so if I let you go, you're going to tell him, and so the perception is that Joel is feared.
Yeah, and that was a scene I actually liked much better in the games. And in the games, Joel and Tess go, and they basically wipe out Robert. All of Robert's men, all of his men, and then Tess ends up killing Robert. So they changed that in the
Yeah,
the
this
show.
one, she's like, I told him I wouldn't say anything to you, but I want you to kill him.
Yeah.
That's what she tells Joel.
But then they get there and they're all dead, I guess.
Yeah, so and that's where I didn't have as much knowledge. That was happening fast. I didn't like that scene, how they're breaking in to try to get the battery so they can get out of there.
I feel like they're focusing more on.
And those were the Fireflies, right?
Yeah. So they're the people that Marlene is a member of the Fireflies.
Okay.
So
I wasn't impressed with the Fireflies. They were disorganized. We meet Ellie for the first time, and
yeah, I mean that's kind of accurate. That's how they are in the games.
Okay.
They're like they're just trying to rebel against Fedra, and some people call them terrorist groups. Other people.
Yeah, so you have the what's left of whatever would be the government, people putting people to death that have the virus, in a sense of trying to establish some sort of order, but there's no real order.
Right.
And then you have the Fireflies, or the individuals we meet that are holding Ellie, but we don't really know why. And initially, and they seem like they're just a ragtag group, which is, if that's what they are.
Yeah, I mean
that's fine.
that's accurate. That's what they were in the games. I mean that's what they were. They were, trying to fight Fedra, but we're definitely on the losing end of it. And so that was pretty accurate. My issue is they take a lot of the scenes that would be more action packed. They kind of cut those out.
Yeah.
And focus more on other.
Does the game skip 20 years? Like you said,
Yep,
it does
just
skip
like
20
that.
years? Okay.
Exactly like that. As far as
it didn't bother me so much, the skipping the 20 years. I don't think as a plot device that really, I didn't have a problem with that. I don't think it didn't work. I just, when we were introduced to the Fireflies, in that scene when Joel and Tess break in and then they see the bodies, they see the blood under the door. It was a little disjointed. That was probably the weakest part of the episode. Was that to me those 10 minutes?
That's the part that's greatly different. That I thought was much better in the games.
Okay,
because that's the scene where Joel and Tess go in there and they kill all of Robert's men, and it's
so maybe for this first episode they're trying to establish that we don't really know yet. Tess's propensity for violence or where Joel is. Maybe that's why they changed that up, but.
Tess is a little different too in how she acts. I mean, she's almost seems more like a pill junkie or something. I don't know. She seemed like a little more capable in the games from what I could gather. And another thing was they had Joel's a smuggler, which he is also in the show, but they didn't actually show him
not too much in depth. You just saw him.
Here he's like a straight up drug dealer.
I thought it was really cool how in a post-apocalyptic world he's giving pills to Oxy or whatever to the soldier. He says, "I need that bag back," because that Ziploc bag is like, you're not just going to find extra bags laying around. I thought that was cool. That little bitty nugget there, that attention to detail. I appreciated that. And then just dealing with. The Fireflies against the militarization of the quarantine zones. I have to watch it again. That felt a little off to me. But we see Ellie, and my first impression of Ellie when she's chained up, and then Marlene, the Firefly leader, goes in and says she's going to get her out of here, and get her transported out before Joel arrives. I don't know. Something was off with Ellie. I'm not blaming it on the actress. Maybe it's the lines. Maybe it's that it was a minimal amount of time. But when we first meet Ellie in that room, you think about really strong characters in other series and movies, and when you first see them, you can kind of feel it, right? That there's something to that character. And maybe it's just me, but I just have to be honest. I don't know yet. Maybe I will really enjoy Ellie in the remainder of the series. But in this first episode, I really like Tess. I really like Sarah. I really like Joel. I really like Tommy. Mm-hmm. And Tommy was only in it for a few minutes. But with Ellie, I was like, I don't know. I have to, if Ellie's going to be the foundation of the show,
she is.
Then I don't know. That bothered me or worries me a little bit because and oh, by the way, the actress Bella Ramsey, I loved her character in Game of Thrones. So maybe it was the fact that I know she has a different accent in real life and. The accent, I don't know what it was.
I think she's a good actress. I don't think she's perfect for Ellie, though.
Yeah, something was
people,
off for me.
And it's nothing against the actress. I mean, I see people white knighting for her.
And if my opinion changes or I watch the next few episodes and I feel differently, I'll say that. But I'm being honest about the way I felt about the introduction of Ellie. That was, how I felt. And so then when the crew that Marlene's going to hire to get Ellie out of there, we find out that she has to rely on Joel and Tess to get her out. And so, Joel basically takes on the task, and so as they do so, they're trying to get out, and you're not allowed past the quarantine zone. That is, it's on the walls, and you see all the different punishments and warnings about where you can go and where you can't go. And so Marlene basically tells Joel they have to get Ellie to Wyoming, I believe. She kind of explains to him.
Well, I think aren't they trying to meet at the Capitol building right now? Or am I in the games?
I thought there was some mention about going to Wyoming.
Well, the Wyoming is where Tommy's at, but
okay,
that's where he is in the games.
Yeah, because he's that's one thing I didn't mention earlier. Joel is trying to find Tommy.
Yeah,
he hasn't heard from Tommy in a while, and he thinks that Tommy could be dead.
Which that's actually different. And in the games, he tries to find Tommy later, but
okay,
and they make that his central motivation right from the beginning.
Yeah, so that's one thing we should mention is that he's lost track of Tommy. Mm-hmm. He's trying to find him, and so now he's got this girl, and him and Tess are trying to get Ellie out of the militarization zone, and they encounter the same soldier that Joel sold the drugs to, and the soldier does the test, and we now see. It's really cool the way they did it. They showed green for Joel, green for Tess, so they don't have the virus. And then as he's testing Ellie, she stabs the soldier with a knife. But as the soldier falls down and the scuffle ensues, you see the red on the scanner that I guess is falling down. But Tess sees it and freaks out. And so at that point, the scene, we have Ellie show her arm where she's got, scabs, or you see that she's had the virus, and she says, "Look, did she say I'm immune, or did she say I've had it for 3 weeks?" Or?
Yeah, that's what it is. She got bit several weeks ago, and I think it takes 2 days on average to turn. So she's 3 weeks, and not even other than that scar, she's fine. So that's mostly how it was in the games. There was that scene was a little bit different, but basically the same premise. The main points they're following for the most part. So
yeah, and I thought that we finally get a sense of, okay, who is Joel when he knocks the soldier down and he just beats him to death. I'm assuming the soldier's dead because he just beats him to death with his fists, and you see Tess is scared, or she's got an honest look on her face, but Ellie's character almost looks sadistic, like, hey, this guy protected me.
Yeah,
it's that part was done well by the actress, but Bella playing Ellie, but she looks at Joel like, hey, I've got a protector here, and he doesn't hesitate to kill him. So they make their way through the fence, and Tess says, we've got to go now, and they go out, and that's where we see the scene you showed about the buildings leaning on each other as they make their way.
Yeah, it looks like I was taken right out of the game.
And do we hear the zombies or I think we hear some.
No, you hear
sounds.
You hear they go to the radio where they have this code where different music means different situations.
Right, but before they cut to that, wasn't there the sound? And when you're seeing the buildings, I thought we heard like a zombie type sound.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I thought I did, but if I'm wrong on that, someone will leave a comment. But then we cut to explain the Joel had been trying to reach out before that, but now Joel's
I think
gone.
He was trying to reach Bill, but there's
he's got a code.
Yeah, and Bill plays different types of music, and the music means different things. I can't remember, like 60s meant something, 70s meant one thing, and then 80s meant trouble.
And we didn't talk about that scene, but for those that don't know or didn't play the game, or because that was a little confusing too, Ellie takes his book and breaks down the 80s.
That scene's actually not in the game.
It's based on 80s, right?
Yeah.
So she figures out, she kind of breaks the code, and then we see the end scene where there's something patching through, right? Yeah. Which is communication to Joel, but he doesn't hear it. And so he's gone. So first episode ends. The ratings came in for Last of Us, and it was around 4.5 million viewers. You know what was interesting about that was HBO then came out and tried to explain the ratings. And they didn't explain the ratings when House of the Dragon drew 10 million viewers and set the record for the first night, and then millions of viewers when you started looking at all the other platforms over a 2 or 3 day period. Yeah. But on this one, I thought it was weird that HBO, because 4.5 million viewers is like the best rating for an initial show, original show, since Boardwalk Empire. So in over a decade, behind House of the Dragon. So not bad, good. But, you know, the fact that HBO explained it and then tried to talk about there was, you know, several million more views.
You think the expectations were higher?
I think so, and the cost of doing the show. And keep in mind that we have new leadership at
well, the games
Warner's
sold
now.
About, if you take the sales of the games combined, I think they sold like 37 million copies. So,
well, and we have new leadership running HBO and Warner now, and David Zaslav, and so I thought it was just interesting that they felt the need to explain, because if you would have just told me 4.5 million viewers, 5 million viewers, I'd have said,
I don't know what their expectation is.
So
that seems like that's okay.
So the HBO series that stars Zendaya, Euphoria, did 2.5 million viewers its first episode. By the end of the season, it was doing 19 million. So it's possible. Last of Us, if people love it and the reviews are legitimately good and their feedback is good and people tune in to watch it, could it get there? We don't know that. We have to wait the rest of the season. But I do know that there are some controversial episodes coming up. And for me, we don't get into the politics. We don't get into controversies.
Just give our opinions.
We're going to give our opinion, but at the end of the day, it's about story. If the story is told well and we feel that we enjoyed the storytelling part, we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about how it compares to the game, because that's what it's based on. It's like when we talked about Game of Thrones, or you talk about Harry Potter. If it's based on books, people are going to talk about how the show or movie is different than the book. That's just going to happen. Same thing with the game.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that from your point of view and mine as a non-game player of the series. But I thought that was interesting talking about the ratings. You know, it remains to be seen, you know, the rest of the season, what the ratings are going to do. Is it going to turn into a Euphoria, or is it going to drop off? The one thing that I'm concerned about with this one is it going to be a water cooler type show? And I think that if they're going to do a season 2, which I'd imagine they'll greenlight that pretty quickly, they may want to consider this being something that they release multiple episodes like they did the first 2 for this premiere, to where you can binge it. So a lot of things that could happen with this show, and you know, it remains to be seen how it's going to catch on with the viewers and build over time or stay level.
It's going to be a mini series regardless, though. I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll finish.
Maybe 2 seasons.
Well, there were some scenes that I saw that reminded me. They look like they're straight from the end of the game. So I think they're going to make the first season cover the entire first game, I believe. So I can only really see 2 seasons. Anything beyond that would really be dragging it out.
Okay. Well, we're going to cover it, and this will be interesting in terms of how people react as the show moves forward. But we will be here to give our thoughts on it. If you like what you heard and saw today, leave a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow our content. And TCB.